That brings us to topic C. Look at us moving along. The topic C is common connection interfaces. Come on, they're common. So we're going to go over all types. We have our VGA, video grid array. Hope you're not using this anymore. This is old school analog. We have our DVI. There's versions of DVI. We will go through each one. But this is another type of display. We have many display ports. We have USB-C, which now allows for video and audio to run through just like an HDMI channel or HDMI cable, which was the next one we're looking at. And the last one, but not least, is called a DisplayPort. DisplayPorts do the same thing as HDMI, but you know what's cool about them? They're royalty-free. Say what? Free. So when a manufacturer wants to create laptops, they don't have to pay any patent or royalty to put DisplayPorts on them. Aha! So now you're wondering, why do I have a DisplayPort on the side of my computer? Because it's cheaper to produce. All right. So all these DisplayPorts and connections, they all work with how we interface to the computer. So we're just using the term interface. You can use it in any type of category, but it's the point at which two devices connect and communicate with each other. A port is an input or output port, essentially describing a device connection through which data can be sent and received. Whatever. Let's say a port is easier to explain to say. Ports are usually fixed or integrated to your motherboard, such as USBs, HDMI, and so on. They're not RFUs. You cannot field replace them. You can shut them off and then put in an expansion card, but you really can't replace the physical component that broke on the motherboard because it's integrated. And then obviously we're just saying, what is a connection? Well, that's the access point that enables a computer to communicate with internal or external components. So now that we got the vocab out of the way, let's take a look at what we're looking at in this topic. Well, your ports can be male or female. They can be keyed. We already explained. Keyed means only one possible way to insert. And a lot of the keyed ports or connections, make sure you're not trying to attach a version that is not supported. There are also color codes for certain external ports. Taking a look at this example, we have USB version 3, which is nice over here on our computer. And we are connecting to a portable hard drive. This could be like a 2 terabyte external drive that we put up on our desk. And it goes from your type A connector, which is your regular USB-C connection, or USB-C connector itself, and it has a dongle or a connection switchover to micro USB, which plugs into the external hard drive. What would I use this for? What do we commonly use this setup for? Well, I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Oh yeah, that is correct. Backups. Good job out there, John. Backups. Backing up, doing backups, regular system, which we're going to do throughout this class. That's what we would use this external drive for. All right, moving on. Again, our I/O, a hardware connection interface on a personal computer that enables devices to be connected to a machine. Look at all these I/O. Again, we have our HDMI, our DVI. We're going to learn DVI you'll see on the back of a monitor. And then you're going to go, okay, well, I got this weird looking connection. That's a DVI. I go to my machine. Oh, I don't have a DVI connector. What do? You get the converter cable. They're going to have a DVI on one end to plug into the monitor, and they're going to have an HDMI on the other end to convert it into your machine. So there's going to be, you're going to have to really familiarize yourself. Pretty much every input-output port or connector can be converted into a different type of source interface. So we're always going to be using them in IT. That'll be one thing you'll run around and go get, or you'll have in a bag with you, hopefully, so you don't have to go back to your desk. We have SATA connections. Excuse me. Serial ATA. What are they used for again? You're right. Your standard hard drive. Blu-ray disc, whatever standard equipment you're using, they go into your SATA controller connection. One device per one connector. We have our USB, Universal Serial Bus, using serial communication. What is this bad boy? RJ45. RJ45. That is where we plug our physical patch cable into. The patch cable that allows you to connect to your router to get out to the internet or to connect inside to your internal LAN. And then we have our audio ports. And we'll go through the scheme of all the different types of colors. Now, here's where you got to start getting your memorization on. You're going to have to repeat and study this. This is not something I ever knew anybody would retain the first time they hear it. But we know what USB is now, right? It's an interface standard designed to provide high-performance connections for numerous types of peripherals with minimum device configuration. That's a lot to say, but it's true. So USB connectors have become pretty much standard for any type of device you're trying to introduce, like a peripheral device, like a, printer, I would say, but we do wireless. Any type of thing, wireless mouse and keyboard, a whole bunch of different devices utilize USB. So it's a standard method for connecting all type of peripheral devices. This is going to blow your mind. A USB port, one USB port, can actually control 127 USB devices. One port can support 127 USB devices. Now, obviously, you're never going to put that to test, and the devices may need additional power source, but the communication, it's called daisy chaining. Let me give you a good example, and people do use this. So let's say you had a keyboard, and you plugged your keyboard into a USB port. On the side of your keyboard, you had another USB. You plugged your mouse into that. That's daisy chaining your keyboard to your mouse. If you did that 127 times, it would all be able to run through one USB port. So here's something that a lot of people will say, oh my God, I'm running out of USB ports. Oh my God, what am I going to do? You go, what? You're not running out of USB ports. All you got to do is plug in one USB port with a cable to a USB hub. You can have a hub. I have them on my desk. I have 5 USB hubs, 5 ports connected to one USB connection. So now I have 5 USBs available by only using one connection port. All right, so that's the way to easily expand it. And that's what we're saying right here. Devices are hubs of function. So we have the ability to daisy chain all these different devices under one USB. Miraculous. I love it. All right, here's the standards. And here's starting to come the speeds. Let's go. So USB version 1.1, the first USB that ever came out. USB ran at 1.5 megabits per second or 12 megabits per second. Now you're seeing the true B because we're talking about transmission speed, not how much data it can actually use. So what I want you to do is forget this first one and remember the second one. So when they say USB version 1 or 1.1, you're going to say 12 megabits per second. The cord can only go 5 meters in length. USB 2, now look at this, 12 megabits. USB 2 jumped all the way up to 480 megabits a second. 12, 480. It almost thinks, like, what were they doing when they created the first one, if they can get jumped that much? And that's still no transmission speed in today's world, right? But USB 2, 480. USB 3, this is the first version of USB 3. That is referred to as super speed. You also can denote USB 3 by what? By what? I can't hear you out there. Nope, you are correct. The blue. So if you ever look at the side of your computer and you see a USB port and it's blue, that means it's USB 3 or newer. So the blue will indicate USB 3. And now look where we went. 400 megabits all the way up to 5 gigabits per second. 5 gigabits per second? I don't understand. That is fast as you can imagine. So 5 gigabits per second is going to handle some really serious throughput speeds. And then they said, we can do better. We have 3.1. Remember it this way. 3 is 5 gigabits. 3.1 went to 10. Use the 1 to associate with the 10 gigabits per second. And 3.2, use the 2 to associate 20 gigabits per second. 20 gigabits? That's double fast. So 20 gigabits a second is extremely fast speeds. And this is going to allow you to copy information that is huge in no time. So we're using, with USB 3.2, we're using the new USB-C connector, which is glorious too, because it doesn't matter which way you put it in. There's no upside down anymore with USB. Whew, thank God. You know how you got your arm and your arm's all the way up behind your TV and you're like, oh, I think it's the USB. And then you're putting it in upside down. And you can't figure out which way it's going because you can't see it. Thank God that's all over with. We are now not worrying about that with USB-C. Remember these speeds. I'm going to pause real quick again. USB 1, 12 megabits. USB 2, 480. USB 3, 5 gigabit. USB 3.1, 10. And USB 3.2, 20. You have to be able to ram them off before sitting for the exam because you're going to have them sporadically all through the hardware exam. One of the most common and old school, regardless if it's a type, USB version 2 or 3, let's just concentrate on 3. But you had type A. So when USB 3.0 came out, it still used the standard type A connector. And this is the one that's basically on the system that you plug into to the computer. Now, remember, I said it's blue. If it's blue, it dictates that it's USB 3 or newer. So that gives you a visual sign both on the plug and usually on the USB type A on the desktop itself. They will both be color-coded blue. If you don't see the color, but you do see an SS on the actual computer, that also tells you it's super speed and you know it's USB 3. There's also all different types of USB connectors, which we can see better here. So I'm going to move to the next slide here. So here we go. We have our type A, and these are version 2. We have our B, which you can see is the one that we used to use for printers. Now that they're wireless, we don't really use these much, but these are your printer USB. Then we have our mini B and micro B, which you would commonly use your micro B to plug in your cell phones and charge them. With USB 3.0, you have your standard A, B, micro B, and don't forget the all-important new type with USB 3 version 2 is our USB-C. Type-C connector. It can support video, which no prior USB cable or connector could. So now we actually have something that we can transfer data with, watch movies on. It's a glorious thing. And charge devices all at the same time. So this is what you're looking at and working with now and in the future. But you still have to memorize or be familiar with the different form factors of USB connections. This just tells you the logo here. So again, we have super speed. If it's version 3.1 or 3, it's running at 5 gigabits. Or if it's 3.1, it's running at 10, because remember, 1 refers to 10. And then versions 2, you'll see super speed 20. So the version 2 runs 20 gigabits, so you'll see super speed 20. I just want you to actually pay attention to the logo here, because that's what I was referring to. You may see on the desktop, and that tells you visually, without reading docs, what you have there. Now let's get into other type of connectors. Thunderbolts. Thunderbolt doesn't just sound cool, it is cool. Thunderbolt has the fastest throughput of any connection type. All right? It's pretty much being utilized on different machines now, but it was an Apple-created device. It can use display and sound, so it supports video, data, power, all wrapped up into one very fast 20 gigabit and allows up to 6 devices. So unlike USB that has that really beat, you can daisy chain 127, Thunderbolt, you can daisy chain 6. And we're going to get all these speeds on a different chart, so I'll worry about the speeds in a second. Then we're coming down to Lightning. Now, is that the Tampa Bay Lightning that's going to go ahead and win 3 Stanley Cups in a row? I don't know. We're not really talking about that now, but it's going to happen. It's a tri-peat, whatever you want to call it. Lightning is Apple proprietary. So Lightning will be used for your iPads, your ISO devices, that type of thing. It has a reversible connector. That's probably where USB-C got this from. Doesn't matter which side you put in, you're not doing it backwards, which is great. And it's really restricted to mobile devices. So adapter cables needed to connect to a PC. You need another type on one end to connect to the PC. But this is what you're going to be basically charging your ISO devices with. This weird one at the bottom is kind of weird, and it's not very common. It's called a DB9 or RD232, excuse me. And look at these rates. You're saying, why are we talking about this? This looks like outdated technology, and it really is. It connects to serial ports, and the only time you would see these, and when you see the DB is more commonly referred to DB, and when you see 9, that just means you're using a DB with 9 pins. There's also commonly DB25, that's a connector that has 25 pins. These connectors are typically used for an IT technician to have a laptop with one of these connectors to connect into a network piece of equipment, such as a router, a switch, a firewall. This is to physically connect into these devices to program them manually, when we normally just go over some type of internal web page to the web page interface and work with them. But this is how we can actually connect to them physically. So that's why we still talk about them, and that's why they're still here in the book. All right, let's rock in here. Here we go. Here we go. So we are looking at Thunderbolt, we just said, tremendously fast. High-speed serial connection, always using that serial communication. It has data and power on the same cable. It's based on a mini DisplayPort standard, so that's where it got its grounds, how it got developed. And then we have different versions. Version 1 of Thunderbolt, 10 gigabits. So the first version of this thing ran at 10 gigabits. Whew. Version 2 is at 20, and version C, which can also be used through a USB-C connector, runs at 40 gigabits per second. Holy moly. That is completely fast. So you know where this would be used in a good purpose? It's like live television. You know, when you got to connect something back to a satellite dish or something, you want it to go as fast as possible with no delay. Or like my man back here, John, who does all his video editing and stuff of that nature, you want fast connection. So I'm sure he's a big fan of these Thunderbolts and uses on all of his equipment.